The Utah Utes defense is going to absolutely feast week one against the UCLA offense led by Nico Iamaleava. What am I talking about? I'm going to tell you on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen and view of the day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. If it's your first time tuning into the show, make sure you like and subscribe. Today's episode is brought to you by our great friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On College. That's all caps, no spaces, for $20 off your first purchase. My name is JT Wistrcill, and on today's show, we have a loaded one for you. Going to be talking about Utah actually being ranked in the top 15 by one preseason ranking. Also talk about BYU's very bold move to start a true freshman and why I think that will be very good for the Utah Utes. But first, want to start with the fact that, hey, we're less than 2 weeks away from Utah and UCLA facing off in Pasadena, kind of your Saturday week one wrap-up game. Yes, there's games Sunday and Monday because it's Labor Day, but the final best game of that first Saturday of college football is by far for the 11 p.m. I wish it wasn't at 11 p.m., but it is Utah traveling up to take on UCLA. I'm incredibly excited for this matchup, and the country is as well. This matchup got a lot more intriguing when Nico Iamaleava, the Tennessee quarterback from a season ago, decided to join the Bruins this offseason. That was a big story, right? It was, hey, he wanted more money from Tennessee and then enters the portal, and reports where he didn't even get the money he was seeking from UCLA, but he does end up there. And he also went there after spring ball. So those spring reps are very valuable that you get learning the offense and just experiencing those live reps going against the defense. Like, yes, you can throw with your teammates in the summer, study the playbook, all of that, right? But it's not the same as those live practice reps. The best reps are always going to be live game reps, but the next best thing are live practice reps, or as live a practice rep can be when the quarterback can't get hit, right? But those are very essential reps, and Nico didn't get those. And I do think that Nico is going to improve year one to year two. We see quarterbacks do that. Essentially, it's just hard as a true freshman to play and be really good year one. Like Trevor Lawrence is very few and far between where we see these first-year guys come in and just have success. I know Dylan Raiola led Nebraska to a bowl game last year, but he was very up and down and had some really rough moments in total, right? Nico helped his team get to the playoff, but that Josh Heupel-led team, he's Heupel, one of the 20 best coaches in the sport, I think we could agree on, right? That was a UCLA team built on the run game more than anything. I mean, they made the college football playoff, right? And Nico only threw for over 200 yards in 3 of his 10 games against P4 competition. Devin Dampier only played 2 P4 teams, one of those actually being an SEC team in Auburn. He threw for over 200 yards in both of those too. And one thing to note as well for Nico in his first game with his new offensive coordinator who had some success at Indiana as the QB's coach, right? So it's a good get for UCLA, but it's a new offense. It's Nico coming in, building the chemistry, the trust, all of these, lots of new parts for a UCLA team that ended the year on a little bit of a hot streak. They won some games, but overall is replacing a lot of pieces. And you know what? It's not good to try and be replacing a lot of pieces, implementing a new system, a new quarterback getting settled into all of that. You know what's not the team you want to see? A Utah Utes team that has one of the best defensive coordinators in all of college football. That's Morgan Scalley. Morgan Scalley has helped this Utah defense be elite year in and year out, whether it's Pac-12 or even last year. A heavy just load was on their shoulders because of how bad the Utah offense was. Yet Utah still managed to have a top 30 defense in the country. And that top 30 defense, even if they take a slight step back to me, I still think it's going to be among the 40 to 45 best in the sport. And I do think this defense, who they lost 9 key contributors, but they also brought back 9 key contributors. So once again, not starters, but guys who played a lot of snaps from last season. That's because obviously I know the math on that doesn't work. Like, hey, they lost, like it's not 11, but they have 9 guys who played in significant number of snaps for them coming back. So there are some new transfers and new pieces in there, but we also just when we're projecting things for a college football season, right? We have to take the known commodities and the things that we have to put the benefit of the doubt and the trust in the things that have consistently proven to be true. Utah has a good defense, consistently year in and year out. They do, especially when you look at some of the guys that they have coming back. Talk about personnel in a moment. There's no way this defense is bad. UCLA's offense was not very good last year, and there is a path for it being bad in the Big Ten when you look at all these new pieces trying to come together. As I said, I do expect Nico to improve freshman to sophomore season. You look at what he did last year, over 2,600 passing yards, 19 touchdowns, just 5 interceptions. Did have a QBR outside the top 30, which I don't love, but It's QBR. I don't swear by it always, but I do think it's something, still a stat, right? So one thing to know about Nico, though, is, as I mentioned, Utah had a top 30 defense last year. I expect that even if they drop slightly to still be a really good defense, as Utah team has. If we look last year and say, okay, if Utah has a top 30 to 40 defense, how did Nico fare against top 40 defenses last year? He played 3 of them. They actually all 3 landed in the top 30. In his 3 games against those top 30 those teams with the top 30 defense, Nico did not throw for over 200 yards in any of them. So what does that mean? Tennessee was relying on their run game to really get everything going. And that's going to be easier said than done against a Utah team that's very physical up front. I have my questions about Utah's pass rush this coming season, but with the personnel Utah has, especially at linebacker, right? Lander Barton, Jonathan Hall another year, and the coaches are raving about him. Leavani Demooney back as another guy. And defensive tackles and defensive ends that I do think will do a good job standing up against the run. And then it's going to come down to some blitzes and some surprise guys getting home on 3rd and long. But I like a lot of what Utah brings back in the secondary, including, I think, what will be one of the 10 best safety tandems in college football and the best in the Big 12. I'm calling my shot there with Teo Johnson and Rabbit Evans back there. Smith Snowden, also one of the best young corners in college football. But either way, I think it's going to be very hard for this UCLA offense to run the ball. I also think they're going to struggle to pick up those exotic Utah blitzes and just hold up in pass protection, because this is a very new offensive line that UCLA is also pairing and putting together. The UA Dog Pound, Max Vrooman, wrote a piece scouting this new UCLA team. And when talking about the offensive line, this is what he wrote. And once again, you can find this article at UW Dog Pound. This is a fairly experienced unit for UCLA, as 4 starters have at least 8 career P4 starts under their belt, but they're not very productive when they're on the field. The highest rated starter, according to PFF, is their guard, and he is only one who's above 61. Reminder, Spencer Fano is the best in the country, was in the 90s. So is everyone going to be in the 90s? No, but no one above 70 is very concerning, right? Like UCLA brought in some transfers there, but they're asking it to once again all come together in a new system. They're paying Eric Bieniemy like $1 million not to be there. All come together in a new system week 1, facing one of the best defensive coordinators in college football. Does, in a way, UCLA have a element of surprise? Yeah, I'm sure Morgan Scalley's watched a ton of Indiana, though, to understand what concepts they'll try to do. And, Nico could make a sophomore year leap and right off the bat just be like, boom, I'm here, this UCLA team, we're ready to roll. But there's also some other factors with this UCLA team, right? Like their wide receiver core is a complete unknown. They actually have former Utah 4-star receiver Mikey Matthews, but no one on that wide receiver core has gone over 400 yards in a season, right? They have a strong tight end, but he missed a lot of last year with an injury. So what's he going to be like coming back week 1? And their defense was the strength of that team down the stretch last year, but even they have a lot of new faces on it too. So it's just a lot of new, and it's a rebuilding UCLA team, still a rebuilding program. The rebuild didn't get off to a great start last year. They didn't make a bowl game. Like it wasn't smooth sailing. And I do believe UCLA will get better as the season goes on, but I don't think it starts well for them week 1. I think Utah's going to turn up the heat, bring the pressure. I don't think there's going to be rushing lanes available for UCLA, and I actually do like their back. I think he's solid. Javian Thomas had over 600 yards last year, averaged over 6 yards per carry, right? And I think eventually that offensive line will be good, and I'm not expecting this UCLA team to like, hey, that's not like they're going to – Utah's not going to go in the Rose Bowl and shut them out. But – as we sit here right now, I don't see them crossing 20 points. I think the Utah defense will be that good. I think the corners are going to be sticky in coverage. I think this defensive line will get home when it's needed, and the sacks and the creativity Morgan Scalley is going to bring up with the blitzes and pressures is going to throw that offensive line off and allow Utah to get home and fluster Nico into a couple of mistakes. And I think it's just going to be one of those ones early on where we're talking about, hey, maybe this result would have been different or maybe an even closer game, because I do think Utah will win this game by over 10 points. I think we'll look at it and go, maybe it would have been different if Nico got there in the spring and got to go through spring ball. Instead, got there after that. And I think those loss of reps will hurt. I think all these new pieces trying to come together is not going to be ideal for the Bruins. And I do believe the Utah Utes are going to make Nico have a very long first game as a Bruin, much to the delight of Tennessee Volunteer fans. So it'll be interesting to see how that works week 1. Let me know in the comments below too. What do you guys think about Utah versus UCLA, this week 1 matchup? Cannot wait to get there. Just like I can't wait that we have Utah versus BYU back in 2025. Cougars announced their starting quarterback. They didn't announce their starting quarterback. All of the reports are saying who their starting quarterback is going to be. The answer is surprising, but I do think it's a very encouraging sign if you're rooting for the Utah Utes, which most of you watching the show probably are. I'm going to tell you why Utah fans should be excited in one moment. Today's show is brought to you by Drip Drop. If you're trying to stay on top of your routine, whether that's workouts, long days on campus, or staying focused through back-to-back classes, hydration is where it all starts, and that's where Drip Drop comes in. When I'm on top of my hydration, I notice everything works better. My energy, my mood, my focus, even my skin. But getting enough fluids every day isn't always easy. That's why I've been loving Drip Drop. Drip Drop is doctor-developed and scientifically proven for fast hydration. It uses the perfect balance of sodium, electrolytes, and glucose to help your body absorb fluids quickly, delivering 3 times the electrolytes and half the sugar of a leading sports drink. It's become my go-to sports drink as well, too. I mean, just helping me keep fueled, refreshed as well. I mean, during those long summer days, it's just been so hot. I know it has been in Utah, all over, wherever you're listening to this podcast. Use Drip Drop to help you stay hydrated and refreshed. Right now, Drip Drop is offering Locked On listeners 20% off your first order. Just a heads up, dripdrop.com. Just head over to dripdrop.com and use that promo code LOCKEDONCollege, all caps, no spaces, for $20 off when you head over to Drip Drop today. Utah's got some time until they play BYU, and that's good for the Cougars because, to put it frankly, if I was a BYU fan, I'd be very concerned. Starting a true freshman, as we just talked about last year with Nico in Tennessee, I mentioned Dylan Raiola too, it doesn't go very well. When is the last time a team started a true freshman quarterback and went on to have major success? Yes, like Tennessee, I said, they just made the playoff last year, but I will say like contended, and even in a conference as wide open as the Big 12, I'll add, with these elite quarterbacks this conference possesses. Sawyer Robertson. I don't know why, or Robinson, excuse me. Actually, it's Robertson. I don't know why people are sweeping on Baylor. They seem to be one of the most slept on teams in the country to me, despite them possibly having one of the best offenses in the country. Baron Morton at Texas Tech, Sam Levitt, Avery Johnson, Utah's own Devin Dampier. No BYU fans love to clown on him. I'd rather have a guy who was the only player in the country last year who threw for over 2,500 yards, rushed for 1,000 yards, only quarterback to do that, led the country in yards per carry, was second in forced missed tackles according to PFF, then a complete unknown who, yes, once again, like high recruit in that regard. How good does that serve guys when they actually get to campus? Like, how often do we see high recruits bust? Not saying Bear Bachmeier is going to be a bust, but I'm saying I don't expect his first year with the Cougars to be a very robust offensive output, because speaking overall, we don't normally see that from true freshmen. Versus this Utah team having Devin Dampier will be big. Utah just last year had to ride it out with Isaac Wilson. And we saw, even though Wilson was a 4-star recruit, a higher one than Bear Bachmeier, I might add too. If you look at 24/7 Sports, he was the 34th rated QB in his class, the 54th rated player in the state of California alone, 6'2", 220 pounds. The fact that he was able to take this job, I think, is very concerning for BYU. And look, I thought it was going to be McKay Hillstead. I'm surprised it's not, and we'll see if we eventually see him. We'll see. It's going to be hard for Bear to finish out the season. Like, sometimes we see true freshmen do this, but I think it's going to be hard, especially with the expectations that BYU understandably has after the success last season. But this is a BYU team too. Let's not forget they have questions at both their offensive tackle spots. I think the interior offensive line will be solid for the Cougars, but they have massive questions at the tackle spots because of the lack of playing time for those guys. You look at as well too, what does this BYU team also have? They're trying to have this defensive line come together. The defense as well. Like, it's a lot of, they have some guys who are back contributors, and I trust Jay Hill, but there's some new pieces there. Also, Chase Roberts, he's awesome. No one else on that BYU receiving core has cracked over 230 yards in a collegiate receiving season. Like, I like Parker Kingston, but you got to go out there and prove that you can do it. And I think this BYU team is going to struggle to do that this year as a Big 12 contender. Honestly, when I first heard the news of this, I said, I don't know if BYU is going to make a bowl game this year because they have such a massive question mark at the most important position in the sport. I don't feel comfortable sitting here saying like, hey, this BYU team is going to go on a run. I already have them going 7-5. I'm very much right now I bring that down to 6-6. The only caveat I will add is the schedule is such a cakewalk. Portland State week 1, shout out Big Sky, but they're winning that, right? Stanford, that might be the worst P4 team. East Carolina, I know it's cross country and Jake was nervous about it, but I'm just not scared of that. And then they do have their schedule is they get some of the worst teams in the Big 12, so they line up a little bit lucky there. I don't think West Virginia is going to be very good this year, but just it's a lot of transfers, unknowns there. Arizona, everyone doesn't think they'll be good. Cincinnati and UCF, And they get Colorado too, right? So there's some swing games in there. I actually do think Colorado's home in that game. I think that Buffs team is going to be not as bad as some people say. I don't think they're like a top 25 teams by any stretch of the imagination, but it's a more complete roster than some of the ones they've had in the past. And I think Caden Salters will be solid. So I think this is a BYU team that is going to be fighting for bowl eligibility at the end of the year because of some of those questions along the offensive line. Also, like, I have a memory, and I think sometimes people like lose sight of what we've been saying in the past. Like all last year, I heard a lot of people being mad at Aaron Roderick and talking about how his offense wasn't that great. So, and I don't think Aaron Roderick, and I like Aaron Roderick, I think he does a fine job, but I don't think he is one of the top offensive minds in the sport. So how is he going to adapt? And does he also have the offensive personnel? I like Martin, the running back. Carson Ryan, I think he's going to have a really good year. We already said Roberts, but like the other receivers, those questions at offensive tackle, if your blind side isn't solidified, that's a massive concern if you're this BYU team. And I do think it's a massive concern. So we'll see how Bear does dealing with the pressure. You know, Jake Retzlaff, he was not great last year by any stretch of the imagination, but he was still I still think he was a top 10 quarterback in the conference last year. But I know that, you know, it's like, hey, he was technically graded as the 11th, whatever. Like he came through in moments. It's funny, the switch that's now happened. I used to think Retzlaff was overrated based on what people were saying about him. And now I think was a little underrated what he did last year because he did come through in some big moments. It's going to be very hard for Bear Bachmeier to do that. Also, it's just a matter of fact that this BYU program, well, no doubt on the rise. How many times have we seen teams have a year where they win 10 games or whatever, and then they fall back down the following year? I like Kalani Sitake. Don't think BYU is going to be a disaster by any stretch of the imagination, but I just don't see this team as a Big 12 contender this year because at the biggest and most important position in the sport, they have a massive question mark. And right now, one of the, on paper, worst starting quarterbacks in the Big 12. That's absolutely objectively true because he has not played this sport yet. And also a reminder, I was just talking about the importance of spring ball in the first segment. We were talking about how important it is to go through spring ball with your team. Bear Bachmeier did not do that. He was with Stanford during the spring and then transferred to BYU. And also hasn't been getting the lion's share of the first team reps. He's been in a legit battle with McKay Hillstead. So now that the reports by, I believe, Pete Novak from On3 was the first one, or one of the ones to report. I'm sure a lot of our local reporters in Utah were all over it too. But now that you have this situation where you're going to have your guy coming in, he didn't get those spring ball reps. He's been fighting for the job, which has built adversity. I agree with that. And he gets some ramp up games in him, right? But I just don't see how this BYU team contends in the Big 12 with a quarterback conference as heavy as the Big 12. I do believe like it's arguably the best or second best in college football. It's like them and the SEC, right? Reports were last week, Pete Thamel said nothing's going to come from the John Mateer case. So, you know, John Mateer, Lenore Sellers, Arch Manning, Garrett Nussmeier. I can give the SEC and say, hey, maybe I'll lean them slightly over the Big 12, but we rattled off all those good Big 12 quarterbacks just a little bit ago. And I just think it's hard to win in this conference when you don't have a guy. Like, yeah, BYU did it last year, but it was at least a guy who's experienced, played the sport, and was able to execute on some of those throws. And I just think Bear is going to make some mistake. I think eventually Bear can be good. Even like you're telling me not this year, but next year, BYU's better. Like I absolutely see that. But because of the way the schedule shapes up, I do think BYU gets bowl eligible. But as we sit here right now, I'm feeling 6-6. I just don't see how this team with a true freshman at quarterback, by the time we get to the final week of Big 12 play, is in the Big 12 championship game conversation. I even mentioned like the games against Arizona. Noah Fafita is a much better quarterback than Bear Bachmeier, right? West Virginia has a question mark at quarterback. UCF does as well. UCF, Cincinnati, I think those starters actually could be solid too. So we'll see if they end up being better as well. But once again, it's incredibly hard to play as a true freshman at quarterback. Like I know BYU fans are starting to talk themselves into this guy, but it's just a matter of fact when you look at how true freshmen normally perform. We were just talking too about Nico, and yes, he helped get his team to the playoff, but I'd also say there's a massive difference between the talent that Tennessee has and BYU has. And I know one's in Big 12 versus SEC, so you say, hey, the Big 12 schedule is a little easier. It is, but also Nico was Nico. Like, you can't exactly compare Nico and Bear Bachmeier because Nico was like a legit 5-star, one of the best quarterbacks in his class. Like everyone was fired up about him, knew he could be really good right away. No one was talking about Bear Bachmeier until, yes, he arrived to BYU and started to turn heads, but no one was sitting there like, this is the guy that's going to be our starting quarterback this year, turn things around. People legitimately thought Nico could be a guy who helps his Nico could be a guy who helps that Tennessee program last year reach the forefront of college football. And now that's exactly what BYU is hoping Bachmeier can do, but I have my questions about that. One thing I was really excited to see was that Utah is getting some respect by some national media members, and they landed in the top 15 of a college football ranking. I believe that's where they should be. I'm actually going to rant on preseason polls momentarily. Today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by our great friends at Game Time. College football season is right around the corner. But also, while we wait for it these extra couple weeks, have you ever just decided last minute that you just want to go to a ball game with friends and family? Maybe it's game day and you suddenly realize you want to be in the stands. That's exactly where Game Time comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last minute tickets without the stress. With the money you save on tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, or even invite a bigger group to come with you. Game Time makes it possible. Game Time makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop the closer you get to first pitch, and they've got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, and a low price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying. Game Time is the official ticketing partner of Locked On MLB, making it easy to browse the app for an exciting MLB game coming up. You know, there's tons going on across Major League Baseball. Make sure you head over to Game Time today. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app and create an account and use code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE, just all caps, no spaces, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time apps today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed when you use Game Time. I get really sick and tired of seeing the same SEC and the Big Ten teams, not in the top 5. I understand those are the teams most likely to win the national championship. But from 12 or like even 10 to like 20, all these same SEC and Big Ten teams over some Big 12 and ACC teams, and especially the Big 12, who's been getting the short end of the stick because Clemson legitimately deserves to be Clemson. If we compare the Big 12 and the ACC, Clemson is clearly on paper, the best team coming out of either of those conferences. And if you want to give Miami the next one, I totally get it. They got Carson Beck. It's the Canes team. It's used NIL very well. They got a nice roster. But, before we get to some of these middle ground SEC teams, even South Carolina in a way, some of the LSUs I've seen, like, why are we acting like a Big 12 team is not more than likely to finish in the top 10 and absolutely in the top 12 of college football? And also, another thing with these rankings, like, don't just like think like, hey, most of the time these teams finish in the top 10. Like, I should probably put another Big 12 team up there. You know, sometimes even a Group of 5 team can finish there if you think like Boise State will do it again. But we always see these same teams, and it's just not going to fall that way. One thing I appreciate about Yahoo Sports' college football top 25 that they posted about is they had Utah at 14 and they had Tech at 13. So they had 2 Big 12 programs inside the top 15. Yes, I would like if one of them was in the top 10, but I can at least acknowledge and appreciate the respect. Also, I don't know what I'm missing with Michigan. I know that there's Bryce Underwood's all this hype, and I just got done talking about true freshman QBs. I know the defense was better last year, but I just don't see a top 15 team for them. I don't think the offense is going to be good enough coming up in 25. But going back to this Utah team, love that they are in the top 15. You will rarely see teams have a Utah this high, but how often do we see unexpected teams or the teams that weren't the best last year rise up, and especially in a conference like the Big 12, surprise everyone, get some standout wins, make some statements? It happens far too often. And I want to see more of these writers and people just make those bolder swings and say, hey, like, it's chalk to go these teams, but honestly, a Big 12 team is going to be ranked higher than the 5th best SEC team. Like, let's start to actually put that into perspective and put that on there. And I appreciate that Utah is the team that gets chosen to be there. I absolutely think Utah is what it takes to win the Big 12. I mentioned some of the Devin Dampier numbers earlier. I think it's the best offensive tackle duo in college football. I think it's a top 10 offensive line and clearly the best in the Big 12. I think the running back room, I think Wayshawn Parker is going to be a star. He had 700 yards last year at Washington State. I think he goes over 1,000 behind this offensive line. Wide receiver, got some questions, but I think they have enough there to win on the outside and make some plays, especially when Devin Dampier, who was only sacked 5 times last year, like, not in his game against Auburn or Arizona, which easily would have been understandable. Like, there's some teams when they play, just like when G5 teams play P4 teams, sometimes they get sacked 5 times just in that game. Devin Dampier got sacked 5 times on the season. He's going to be dancing around, buying time, making Big 12 defenders look silly, give those receivers time to get open. On the defensive side of the ball, we talked about how good that group has been year in and year out. Questions on the pass rush for sure, but I expect this Utah team to get enough done. Why can't Utah win the Big 12? They got the coaching, Jason Beck. I think even though he ended up being Utah's third choice, I think they'll look back and be like, we got our guy. Like I just think Jason Beck is going to have a monster year. BYU people are incredibly high on him too. You can look back on some of those interviews I had at Big 12 Media Day. How many BYU media members, Ben Criddle being one of them, right? Spencer Linton, both of them just raving about the addition of Jason Beck to this Utah football staff. And I do think it's a major addition. I think it's a Utah team that's going to be a force to be reckoned with. And I think of a Utah team that has a chance to be one of the 15 best in college football. But once again, someone from the Big 12 is going to be. So that's why I'm glad just to see Utah and the Big 12 in general starting to get some preseason respect and getting more teams up there. So often it's been like just Arizona State, but I really think there's going to be another Big 12 team that's close. I think there will be two Big 12 teams that go, and this has happened last year. It's not that bold of a take, but like there will be multiple 10-2 Big 12 teams this season. I could even see 3. I could see someone just getting shafted by not shafted, but just like, hey, tiebreaker, kind of like Miami last year, right? Miami only lost 2 games a season ago in the regular season. Now, granted, they lost the 2 best teams. They played Georgia Tech and Syracuse, but it's a team that, hey, they only had 2 losses and they couldn't play in the Big 12 title game. BYU, that happened to them last year. I think it's going to happen again in the Big 12. And if Utah, also the BYU's dream should be to get 2 one-loss teams in the Big 12 title game. That way you're guaranteed to get 2 teams in. If you have a 3-loss team, although if that 3-loss team beats the 1-loss team, like they're probably going to, that team that then has 2 losses, but only because they played an extra game is probably going to get in, because I just don't think it's fair to penalize those teams. Like last year, I thought SMU deserved to get in, and I'm glad they got put in. And it's very tough to win on the road in college football. That's what week 1 proved to us, because we also talked earlier about Nico not playing great against those top defenses. One of his most difficult games was against Ohio State, one of the best defenses in college football, where he's 14 for 31, just 104 yards, was sacked 4 times, and didn't throw a touchdown or an INT, but still, like he was just decimated in that game. It's hard to play in those hostile road environments. That's why it's big if you're Utah too, to try go on a run and put yourself in the best position you can to host a CFP game, which I would absolutely love to see a CFP game in Wistrcill Stadium. And I do believe it's possible. Let's not forget this Utah schedules are just 2 weeks away. Bye games fall at a very optimal time. It's a Utah team as well that, what do they got? They have no back-to-back road games on this schedule. You would get some of your toughest games on the schedule. Arizona State, Kansas State, Texas Tech are 3 of the top Big 12 teams I've seen according to a lot of preseason rankings. All of those teams have to get a win in Wistrcill Stadium. That is something that's much easier said than done. Let's not forget, yes, Utah wasn't great at home last year, but when Utah starts their projected starting quarterback, and I know that's a weird way to phrase it, but bear with me. When they start their projected starting quarterback at the beginning of the season, this team hasn't lost a home game since 2017. Yeah, they lost with their backup last year. Even in 23, they lost with Bryson Barnes. When Utah starts their guy at quarterback at home, haven't lost since 2017. I don't think there's many programs in the country that can say that when they're starting their number 1 guy at quarterback. I don't know if Utah's going to be perfect at home this year because of how tough that schedule is, but I don't see them losing multiple home games this season. I think they bounce back. It's one of the best home field advantages in college football. And I do believe Utah ends up, I've said before, I think Utah actually will end up being a top 10 team in the country. I think they're going to be a team that has a chance to make some noise even in the CFP if they get a first-round home game too. So I'm looking forward to seeing what this Utah team can do, and I'm just so excited to have the season here, and it almost is. We are just 2 weeks away. Week 0 is coming up this week, but we have got tons of great content coming for you guys here on Locked On Utes. Make sure you guys keep it here every single day. We'll be coming at you, talking about the latest from fall camp, getting you ready for the start of the 2025 Utah football season. If you are in the market for a second listen every day, make sure you check out the portal with Brian Smith, who keeps you up to date on all the latest rumors, potential portal entries, and signings in college football. You can be the most informed fan in the rapid changing college football landscape when you go find the portal on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. Thank you again for making Locked On Utes your first listen and view of the day. We'll be back with you tomorrow as Utah football's 25 season inches closer and closer.